Hi, Gerald. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you? Glad to be here.
I'm doing fine, and you're looking pretty good yourself. I hope everything's well on your end.
Pretty good, pretty good.
Good, good. I was perusing your Amazon book page, and I mean, I knew this before because we had talked earlier, but when I see something like this, I have to make mention of it. Sir, you have written 32 books and dating all the way back to 1990, and that's rather impressive. And I guess you picked a certain one to talk about today. Before we get to that, though, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, who you are, and how you got to write all these books?
Okay, well, I'm a psychoanalyst, and so I started out by writing psychoanalytic books for therapists mainly, and I did that most of you know, the first 10 or 20 years of my career. Uh, but, in the corner of my mind, I always wanted to be a creative writer. Uh, and So eventually I started writing other things. To date, I've written 9 novels. Uh, and I've also translated Eastern philosophy. Uh, I translated the Buddhist text, the Dhammapada, and Lao Tzu's 81 sayings. And I've also written a book of poems and illustrated the poems. But what I've been writing recently and the book that I wanted to feature today was my latest novel, which is called Lizzie, a biographical novel. And it's about Lizzie Borden. And I did a lot of research on that, a year of research before I wrote it.
Hmm. Well, that's interesting. When you say novels, I guess you fictionalized some stories, such as the story of that we're talking about now.
Yes, Lizzie, I fictionalized that. Other books are just pure fiction. Sometimes it's autobiographical fiction. Other times it's just a story that I make up. Um, but in this case, Lizzie, it is a biographical novel, but I took the liberty of writing it as a novel because I wanted to capture the real Lizzie. And in order to do that, I had to be able to write the dialogue that she would talk and also the thoughts that she would think. So there's a lot of uh, consciousness in the book.
Hmm. So, as a psychoanalyst, I suppose you can't help but weave that side of yourself into these fictionalized books and make it basically about psychoanalytical viewpoints about your subject.
Well, yes. You know, Many have speculated that Lizzie was molested by her father. But in my book, I actually dramatized that. The book starts when she's 5 years old, and her
Hmm.
mother has just died. And so what I dramatized was her father molesting her after her mother died. She wanted to sleep in her father's bed, which little girls want to do. And at one of these points when he was sleeping in her bed, he molested her. And
Hmm.
this had a lifelong effect on her because he molested her, but then he later stopped and called her an evil person and did not want anything to do with her anymore after that, of any substance. And then
Okay.
he married soon after and started, you know, changing his allegiance to his new wife, and that's where the trouble began. So I go into the whole psychoanalytic, aspect. I go into her thoughts, even from when she was a child all the way up to the murderers. We see the inside of her mind as she's going through all these things.
So I know that it's part of your job, but was it difficult to write those kind of ugly scenes?
Well, no, I enjoyed writing them because I wanted to show the tragedy of Lizzie Borden. She wasn't a monster. She was a tragic figure. She didn't choose to be molested when she was 6 years old, you know. It happened to her. Everything happened to her and pushed her into being the killer that she ended up being. Uh, the book is also very ironic because after the killing, she feels elated and she has an affair with an actress, uh, of the New York and Boston stage. And, and she's enjoying going out with theater people, and she lives a very kind of normal life. Like she's glad that her oppressors are dead.
How does Lizzie Borden get caught?
I went deeply into the recorded history, and so she commits the murders, and then she tells her maid to call the police. Something dreadful has happened to father. And then she tells the police that somebody broke into the house and murdered her father. And at first they don't know it, but she also murdered her stepmother. And they don't discover her because she's upstairs. So the police come and they're looking at the body of the father, and she's in the house, waiting and talking to people. And the police come and interview her, and others arrive and interview her, and she's just sitting in her chair, and her friends are fanning her
Mhm.
and rocking her in the rocker. And uh, for the whole day, they're looking at, and then they finally discover the other body upstairs. And a crowd of people, 100,000 people, gather on the streets outside her house, and and then everybody has to leave at a certain time, and they leave the body. The body's in the house, and she has to spend the night there with one friend, with the body of her father and her stepmother still in the house. That's kind of ironic.
Yeah,
Then they have the trial, and after 10 days, she's acquitted. Everybody's in a hurry to find her innocent.
I
Um,
see.
they see her as a victim or as a woman, whatever, you know. Uh, And so then she inherits several $1 million, she and her older sister from her father, and she buys a new house, and she starts this new life,
Hmm.
which she has an affair with Nance O'Neill. But eventually, she does. She breaks up, or Nance O'Neill breaks up with her, and then her sister breaks up with her, but over the her affair with Nance O'Neill, and she dies alone, very depressed. She is a she steals from the department store in her town several times, does things like that.
Hmm. Tragic life.
Very tragic, and I tried to show her as a tragic figure for sure, as a someone who was just born in the wrong family at the wrong time, and just was driven to this rage in which she murdered her stepmother and father. Uh, I think readers will finally really understand why she did it. It won't be a puzzle anymore when they read my book.
Okay. All right. And there's tragic lives all over, not necessarily in these with these details, but you must have come across a lot of people in your practice who have lives that are dark and spiraling downwards. So, was this an attempt for you to help those people, even if even if they don't read the book, but in your mind, you obviously want people to be better and feel healthy. So, does this help you when you write like this?
Oh, I feel tremendously uplifted when I write. Writing is very uplifting for me always, especially when I write a novel and I feel like I've captured something well. Uh, it is one of the main ways that I that I make myself feel better. Uh, I have no writing block whatsoever these days. I just can't wait to write, and it is a passion for me. And yes, I mean, I think writing this book about Lizzie Borden will be helpful to people. I think it will help. It will show the tragedies that sometimes can happen to people. You don't choose to be born in your family where you're molested and where
Yeah.
these things happen to you that drive you mad. She was driven mad toward the end. And many people have these kind of tragic lives, as you've said, and many of my patients have them, and I try to help them to heal from them.
Hmm. Now, because you like to write and you've written so many books, and you deal with patients, as you said, who have, some tragic lives. Do the two intersect in some way? Do you present yourself as a writer sometimes to certain of your patients and suggest that they read one of your books that you think would pertain to their particular problems?
Not very much. It's kind of, it would be a conflict of interest,
I see.
They think, well, I'm trying to sell my books to them or something. My patients don't really express much curiosity about my books. Some of them come to me because of my books, but a lot of them come to me because I'm in their insurance network. Um, so, you know, it's kind of, they don't want to know too much about me.
Hmm.
I present myself as a psychoanalyst. I don't reveal much about my personal life when I'm doing therapy. And I think they kind of shy away. But now and then I will, if I think one of my books will be beneficial for somebody, like I did a translation of the Buddha's Dhammapada, and I sometimes will, you know, tell patients about this because it's got a bunch of wonderful sayings in it. It's instructions on how to live life, really.
Hmm.
And I'm very much into Eastern philosophy. So, you know, when sometimes my patients will complain about some friend that has betrayed them or been toxic to them, or parents who have been toxic, and I'll say, well, Buddha once said it's better to be alone than to be friends with a fool. Um, I'll give them some sayings from the Dhammapada like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm into Eastern philosophy as well, as you can probably tell from the
Yeah,
background.
I like your art in the background, and I see the Buddha there.
There's a
I
little,
I have an African covering similar to the one you have back there.
oh, that one, that's from Peru. My mother went down to Peru when she was alive. She visited down there and she brought that back for me.
Oh, well, I have one from Africa that's very primitive and similar to that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Well, we're talking about one book. Anything else you want to talk about?
Well, I did my recent book is called The Mass Killer. The book is composed primarily of six case histories of some of the most prominent mass killers, and I tried to understand what made them become mass killers. I mean, the popular theory is that guns are the source of mass killings, and if we eliminate guns, then mass killings will somehow disappear. But I don't think that's so. If there weren't guns, the mass killers would find a way to buy illegal guns or other ways to do their mass killings. Uh, but I think that the reason why America has twice as many mass killings as any other country is because of our culture. We have a disturbed culture, and we have disturbed child rearing.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's a complicated thing. People say, well, how can we cure it? Well, we have to we have to improve our child rearing. We have to heal our culture, which is so divided right now. Uh, we have to heal that culture because it's full of violence and it's full of antagonism. And so if we can't heal our own culture, we're not going to heal the people who are born into our culture. And the mass killers are people who have traumatic childhoods because they come from broken homes. They come from homes where, they don't get what they need when they're growing up, and they develop a rage when
Hmm.
people don't get what they need, and that is a severe thing in their childhood. They develop a rage,
Yeah.
and that rage then becomes the source of the mass killings. When that rage cannot be expressed, uh, when it has to be held on to, uh, you know, you
Mm.
have a rage. Well, one of the mass killers in my book was the one in Newton, Connecticut. He was is like a 20-year-old boy. The first person he killed was his mother. Uh, I mean, he had a rage at her, which he never could express. And so he finally exploded in this killing. And then he went to the school where his mother had taught, and he killed, about 23 or 26 elementary school children. Um, Again, I depict all these mass murders as not as monsters, but as tragic figures uh, who were caught up in in situations that were toxic.
Yeah. Well, you've chosen some pretty dark topics. Do you consider yourself an idealist?
Oh no, I wouldn't say that I am an idealist. I think I'm a realist. The novels I write are realism, which is not in style anymore.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, I used to write a lot of screenplays, and I would submit them to these screenplay websites, and I started getting criticized for being too realistic, and they're telling me, "Oh, realism is out. What are you doing? What are you trying to do here?" You know. Uh, so that seems to be what's happening right now. Realism is out. A
Hmm.
psychological realism is out.
Hmm.
Uh,
We look at the news, we see things on YouTube and, but we're talking about America right now because, I focus my attention on where I live. I live in Canada, but nonetheless, I'm very interested in what's going on in the United States for obvious reasons. Why do you think there's politicians and those people who are in the spotlight, not like yourself, why do you think they don't speak like the way you do about these kind of situations like mass murder? There's it's so polarized. We got to get rid of weapons, certain weapons. Other ones claim the Second Amendment, and they're not communicating with each other. Whereas when you explained it, it was very passionate. That's what caused me to think that perhaps you would like to see the good things in life, and that's why I asked that question.
I came up with some suggestions in the book. One thing I think would be good in America is if we had, say, monthly town halls uh, in which all walks of life would be represented, and we start having a real dialogue in the country where these extreme positions would all be given a voice, one extreme and the other extreme, right wing, left wing, and so forth. They'd all be in a room talking instead of fighting. And they would be compelled to talk, not to talk over each other or to undermine each other, but to talk in a civilized way according to the rules of debate. And if somebody broke the rules, they would be asked to leave the hall. So I think an open discussion like that would do a lot to opening up communication between all the sides and show the human parts of each side. So I would that's one of the things I would suggest is these town halls. Um, and also just perhaps standardized mental health policies where uh, children would all be raised in a standardized way. Now that would be hard to do. But in other words, if parents wanted to have a child, they would have to be examined first and receive training. This would be a way of filtering out schizophrenic parents, borderline parents, parents who are obviously not capable of being healthy parents. And a lot of parents nowadays, a lot of parents are not qualified to be parents. And that is a big problem.
Well, you make a good point there. I think we've all had that conversation in my circles, at least. I know my wife and I have mentioned that. The problem with that, though, is government overreach. Gets a little sticky when an institution butts in and says, "Well, if you want children, you got to have these tests, and we'll tell you whether you're qualified or not." I'm not sure that's a world that would be comfortable to live in, and I think there'd be a lot of pushback on that one.
There would be a lot of pushback, but you have to filter out schizophrenic parents. You have to filter them out. You can't allow anyone who wants to have a child to have a child.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, allow is a strong word. I don't know how that would come. My parents escaped a communist country, and we came to this country as refugees. And the way they described it, everybody was, the government was in everybody's business, checking out your garbage to see if you have more chicken bones than you should have. And if you did, well, then you're in trouble. Um,
well, there's such a thing as totalitarianism and so forth, and we don't want that. But at the same time, you have to take the you have to filter out disturbed parents. You can't
yeah.
let disturbed people have children.
Well, I'm
Uh,
not sure what department would have to be created to do that. And I hope,
yeah, we
personally,
have
I never see
to,
that day come, but that's just me.
I know that's the trouble. There's a lot of pushback, and so the result is random parenting,
Hmm.
and you know
Well,
it,
most children are born as out of an accident, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Oh, surprise, you're pregnant. That I think that's common.
Yeah, well, if that were a case, it was an accident, then the government would have to step in and still assess whether these parents are capable of raising a healthy child, or
Well, one of
whether
the things, sorry to interrupt, but one of the things I remember when I was in the middle of my music years, I had left my career in film and just, for a period of time, it turned out to be 6 years. And right in the middle of all that, my wife got pregnant. And I was a musician and I wasn't making much money, and she was a waitress. And so when the baby was born, all this is registered with the government anyway, right? A person came over probably from the government or some governmental agency, to check to see if this household is proper, and the crib is right and got the right amount of bars with the spacing, checked all these things, and apparently we passed. So maybe there's a little bit of that going on already.
was that in Canada?
And in Canada, yeah.
Okay, well, there's a little bit. I mean, I think there's some parent training required now in some places. But it doesn't go far enough. And
Mhm.
then in order for it to go far enough, a lot of people are going to be very irate, because they consider it their personal freedom to have a child if they want to
Right.
have it.
Well, we took prenatal classes. We volunteered. We wanted to. We wanted to learn what to expect and all that. And I was really keen on it. And I must say that was a wonderful experience. And then we all got together after we had our children. And then we had one final meeting and discussing about how, basically it was the women talking about how the childbirth went. So that was a very enriching period of my life. So perhaps we could institute something like, oh, you're pregnant? Well, you're going to take prenatal classes, and this is where you got to go. And then that brings you closer to the understanding of what it is to be a parent. It does help.
Yeah, anything, all that helps. Every little bit helps.
Yeah. One of the things I like about this show is it goes off the rails once in a while and we start talking about all kinds of stuff. But that's life, and that's the way I look at life. Now, I'm looking at the cover, the Mass Murder book, and the Lizzie Borden book was a little quite different. Where do you get your covers from? How do you figure them out?
Because I had once been a graphic artist, I also did the covers and did everything, did the proofreading, although I had them all proofread by somebody outside as well. So, I designed the covers and they all sort of have the red and the a picture. I chose this picture of Lizzie Borden from a lot of pictures I found online in the common domain.
Okay. Now, besides Amazon, where else are your books available?
They're all available on Amazon. Some of them they're also available at Barnes and Noble.
Cool. Good. And how are sales for you overall? That's a lot of books to be asking that question of, but let's just take the Mass Murder book. How's that sales for that one?
Not too much, not too much so far. I've had to do a lot of the publicity myself, and I've appeared on shows like this and other things. I hired some publicity people to do some things. Uh, my early psychoanalytic books were my best-selling books so far. 101 Common Therapeutic Blunders. It sold, like 30 or 40,000, which was, good for an academic book. My early sales were the most, but since I've been publishing my own books, I guess I haven't learned to publicize them well. Because I think some of them, I mean, this last book, Lizzie, I was on this one podcast called Book Party, and Michael Morrell, who ran that, he wrote just a wonderful, wonderful review of it. Uh, and I've tried to use that review. He called it a literary gem,
Hmm.
so forth, and he went on for 4 or 5 paragraphs. I couldn't have written a better review if I wrote it myself. But it's a matter of getting that kind of review, into the public.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. I ask people to subscribe to this channel uh, because the more people that subscribe, the more views you get, and that gets recommended to more people around the world. And then they see that because that's the only way I know how to get this channel out there, to get people like you to expose your works to the world through YouTube. Do you have a website?
Yes, I have a website. It's livingcenterpress.us. You'll see all the books that I've published myself, including Lizzie, uh, and also the books that I published through other publishers are listed there. All my books are there. Some are featured. Lizzie is the featured book on that site.
Okay. Well, I think we've come to the end of our little discussion here, and it's been very interesting to hear you speak about your books.
Thank you.
Any plans to write another one in the near future?
I'm working on another book right now. It's a satirical novel.
Okay.
Uh, and yeah, I'm always working on something.
Well, when you do, and if you wish to come back on the show to talk about that, you're more than welcome to do that.
Thank you. I've enjoyed being here, enjoyed speaking with you.
Me too. All right, Gerald, you take care of yourself.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you for watching. If you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then please consider hitting that like button and leaving a comment. You can also subscribe and ring that bell because I release 2 episodes per week, one on Wednesdays and one on Saturdays. And if you are an author, I would love to hear from you. Until such time, keep on writing and be kind to one another.